Hey there, today we're kicking off our Heat Check series for the 2025 NBA Draft. If you're unfamiliar with the series, I'll give a brief explanation here in a bit, but this is essentially a scouting report with what I hope is a nice blend of objectivity and my personal opinion, with the final grade divvied out at the end. I've done a number of these in the last 2 years, and I'm really excited to hit the 2025 draft hard in the coming months. So without further ado, first up in the 25 Heat Check series is South Carolina forward Collin Murray-Boyles, who was on draft radars last year as a freshman, but ultimately decided to return to college for season 2 with the Gamecocks. He's just 23 games into his second collegiate season, but I feel we have more than enough info to delve into his game. He stands at just 6'7" and feels like he was plucked out of an older age of basketball, effectively playing center for South Carolina and averaging 15.4 points, 8.8 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.6 steals, and 1.3 blocks per game in his sophomore season. He'll be just a hair over 20 on draft night 2025, making him one of the younger non-freshmen in the entire class. Here's how Heat Check works. I'm going to identify one draft prospect and grade them on what I believe to be the most generally important skills and aspects of their game: athleticism, scoring, defense, passing and playmaking, and overall feel for the game. After those 5, I'll grade one additional skill relative to that prospect that I think is going to have the biggest effect on their stock. That will be deemed the swing skill. Each skill will be graded on the Heat Check chart, with ranges from freezing all the way to scorching. When that's all said and done, I'll divvy out one final overall score. Starting with Murray-Boyles' athleticism, I've given him a warm grade. We'll start with just the pure vitals since it's going to be a big talking point through the video. CMB stands at 6'7" and weighs a stout 230 pounds, but is positionally one of, if not the most undersized player in this draft. In terms of his athleticism though, Murray-Boyles has a nice blend of verticality, strength, speed, and especially coordination. He's got the ability to get above the rim with space, but doesn't solely rely on that around the ring. He's not explosive vertically or horizontally and doesn't boast a ton of elasticity, but is good enough in a variety of these areas to thrive. Murray-Boyles might stick out in the NBA for a few reasons, but it certainly won't be because his pure athleticism. Moving on to the scoring portion, I've graded Murray-Boyles warm here too, but there are very genuinely a limitless number of outcomes regarding his scoring, ranging from the NBA presenting too big of a skill jump to him being an outright mismatch nightly. This is truly one of the more intriguing prospects and skills in the draft class, and I've landed somewhere in the middle on it. We'll start with the basics. Collin Murray-Boyles is essentially playing center for South Carolina, averaging 15.4 points on 59% shooting overall and 27% shooting from beyond the arc on really limited volume. Most simply, despite his size, he plays like a big. He scored the bulk of his points posting up, as the roll man out of the pick and roll, and cutting, and that's by design via his 68% finishing at the rim, which is truly elite. He's got a little aforementioned pop that really helps, but he's really just an elite finisher in the paint regardless, able to power through contact with some sneaky strength and feel. You can send true 5s or even doubles, he's probably still going to find a way to get the ball in the basket. He's skillful despite what the service level glance brings. He's got quite a bit more oomph with the ball in his hands than typical centers too, able to put it on the floor in moderation and create for himself via simple dribble drives, probably due to the fact that he's wing-sized. We'll jump into his outside game more later, but for now we simply need to answer one question: is he good enough at these things to be playable offensively in the NBA? I think the short answer is yes, with some obvious caveats. NBA spacing will be even more helpful in this regard, and he should have the power to outmatch wings and the speed to outmatch some bigs. He likely won't be a focal point on any NBA offense, which does add some questions to his overall production, but I think he'll in the least be able to cut, play the dunker spot, be an efficient roll man, and just generally do some center things. I don't think straight up playing him as a full-time 5 is necessarily viable, so developing the skills necessary to be a 4 would help him truly stick, but we'll get into that later. I've graded CMB hot on defense as he truly is a multi-tooled force on that end of the court in a variety of ways. The only thing keeping him from a scorching grade is the size concerns, and maybe that'll be an eventual oversight on my part because the tape and numbers show he's just that good. As it stands now, Murray-Boyles is averaging 1.6 steals and 1.3 blocks per game in his sophomore season, and he's shown to be a clear defensive playmaker and stopper in his time with the Gamecocks. He's been pretty successful in both isolated and team defense, using his same blend of athleticism, coordination, speed, feel, and basketball IQ to generate turnovers and stifle opposing plays completely. He's strong enough to hang around the paint, but quick enough to move his feet on the perimeter and in help to make a difference. And he ties it all together with the fact he's really aware, active, and smart. He's not likely to be a premier shot blocker or notable rim protector in general, again pointing to the fact he's more likely to play the 4 than 5 at the NBA level, but more so just an opportunistic playmaker. I don't necessarily want to outright compare him to Draymond Green, but there is certainly some overlap. He allegedly has a 7-foot wingspan, which both makes sense of why he would generate so many stocks and put a lot of NBA decision makers at ease in selecting him. Again, there's few holes in his defense on tape and statistically. The only question lies in whether he'll translate to bigger, faster, and simply better players at the NBA level. I tend to think he's shown enough to justify at least taking the gamble that he'll be good. Similarly to the rest of Murray-Boyles' game, his passing and playmaking is wide-ranging, and I've again ultimately landed in the middle ground with a warm grade. The simple rundown is that CMB is averaging 2.5 assists, good number, to 2.7 turnovers, bad number, for a negative assist-to-turnover ratio. We'll just start with the good. Murray-Boyles has genuine feel with the ball in hand and has legitimate potential as a passer playmaker, even spanning to the big leagues. He's genuinely good at reading the floor and has some truly advanced stuff in his bag for a quote-unquote big. His collegiate gravity leads to plenty of open teammates, and he's able to get the ball to them with surprising consistency while cutting, spotting up, and more. He's pretty patient with positioning, and most importantly has the creativity to not predetermine whether he's going to try to score or facilitate. Regarding his high number of turnovers, a huge chunk of them are simply losing the handle or offensive fouls while screening, which still isn't necessarily a positive, but at least eases some of the pressure of bad passing and playmaking specifically. But there are times he can still get pretty overzealous, and my main gripe in this area is that he's just generally a little more loose with the ball than I'd like him to be, more so aiming in general directions than the shooting pocket. Ultimately, I think CMB's passing and even playmaking to a degree will be scalable at the NBA level and be a plus. In terms of his overall feel for the game, I've gone with hot for Murray-Boyles, and that should have been apparent via the previous sections. I think he's got a great feel for the game overall, as well as a healthy balance of basketball IQ on both ends of the court, and I don't think he'd be one of the more successful collegiate players in the country, moonlighting as a big at 6'7" without it. You can see it in his patient but powerful scoring attack, his highly cerebral and instinctive defense, as well as his above average passing skill for his odd archetype. All in all, I think CMB's pure feel for the game is one of the primary reasons to bet on a positive outcome for him down the line. For CMB's swing skill, I've gone with the obvious in shooting, as adding a consistent outside attack to his arsenal would blow his game wide open. If defenders respected his outside shot, he'd have even more leeway to succeed off the bounce, cutting, passing the ball, and so much more. But more importantly, it would allow him to truly play the 4 as he could space alongside NBA 5s. Unfortunately, I'm just not super bullish on his long-term shooting outcome, and that's primarily due to just the numbers we have available and a few little indicators here and there. So far, he's shooting 27% from beyond the arc on just under 1 shot per game. The good news being he's seen massive improvement in a short time in college, seeing as he shot 0 for 5 his entire freshman season. The mechanics aren't dreadful, I'm just not necessarily in love with them, and I think his touch from all over the court and fine free throw numbers aid his cause here. But overall, I just feel like there's too few many reasons for me to lean away from the shooting potential opposed to into it. There may be a future where he's able to stretch the NBA floor in a limited capacity, but if there is, I think it's probably going to be pretty far off and due more to his unique work ethic than real skill. The grade. I've given Collin Murray-Boyles a grade of 7.7 overall. I think despite some real questions about his size and role, there's simply too much good and too many indicators that he can be a successful player in the big leagues. But if a team is willing to lean into him as an ancillary role player who can defend multiple positions, score efficiently when used in a pretty specific way, and playmake on both ends, I think he's more than worth a mid-first to even late lottery pick in the 2025 draft. If a team were confident in things like the three-point shot developing or the handle tightening up even more, he'd be knocking on the door of being one of the better players in this class. That's it for this one. Let me know what you think of Collin Murray-Boyles, what you grade him, where you draft him, drop who you want to see in the next heat check, and we'll see you next time.